room is the one she said.
I did code up.
We're live. Hello. I don't think anyone's there.
Live.
Hello. Probably should mute that.
I don't think anyone's there.
Wow.
It's on a delay, clearly.
Echo. 6, class 3.
Yeah. Can you tell this is my first time live streaming, that it's just a big zoom in? It is their fault. I don't know if the chat is gonna work.
Did you mention what the password was?
It's Geekdom 1100, capital G. It's in the top left
It's at
over
the
there.
top left in red. It's kind of hard to see.
Oh, I see.
I'm gonna broadcast it to the world. Hold on.
All right, I'm connected if you were. Oh, you did. There we go.
I sent it to you. Hopefully it'll download.
And I go.
Sweet.
So we can wait like 5 more minutes, see if anybody else shows up.
Alrighty.
I hope he so.
I hit 3 times.
And it wouldn't work.
I went back down. Oh, 6 also.
If you want to send me your presentation, we could just all use this one.
Okay.
If it's, I don't know, if it's, is it Keynote?
It is Keynote.
Sweet, cool. I'll have them all up here now.
What's your mouse configuration?
Well, if you have some specific specs, maybe.
How's
maybe
your
we could-
cookies?
Yeah, exactly. It's standard. I haven't changed anything about it.
It's backwards.
Yes, yeah, I know.
What's email?
Huh?
Email?
My email?
Sure.
I'll just type it in for you instead of like going into the process quietly.
Oh, I guess we could airdrop
Airdrop.
something.
Yeah, and
It's always where you want.
it works so well. I do that between the devices. But yeah, my mouse configuration will be opposite of yours.
I love that your hair's long enough that you can just tie it in and out.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
As it like falls out. Yeah.
So do you want to try plugging it in? Because she told me it would show up on both screens.
Sure. Yeah. Let me pull this.
Which one do you want the?
Oh yeah. This looks like
It's fancy. Do you have music on the computer?
I mean, I don't know if people will like it. But there's music system.
Because we tried what happened when I tried to have sound come in off my computer.
Oh,
It didn't go well.
Yeah, let me see real quick.
Did you save it?
Sure, fine.
Oh, okay. I
It's
thought
lost.
something was wrong.
Anyone's watching.
I think it's only one person. I think it's me in the other tab.
Quite a few people in our group that live outside of the city or just can't make it in the evening.
Yeah.
So I thought this is a way they could come, kind of. Yeah. I guess so, yeah. How?
I'm getting a bunch of email errors. Those are garbage.
Okay.
Yeah, that works too.
to Claire and Sarah.
And I guess
Should I go to you?
it should be Haley's.
Yeah. Allow me to be started by everyone.
I mean, he can plug his laptop in too. And we all can figure out.
Right, what's the? It's hard to see now. Where do you enable it?
Do you guys have water anywhere?
It's in the, do you want me to bring like water bottles or?
I was just
rather go water container?
Oh, I
Alright, I guess you could.
Technology.
Oh, technology.
Yeah. So I'm not
Like how computers work.
So I get that phone call from my mom once a week. Hey, my email won't work, or my trash can disappeared.
Trash can disappear.
Oh, on the computer.
My mom does the thing where she'll accidentally turn it on Do Not Disturb all the time, and then she just doesn't answer her phone for like 2 weeks. She's like, I don't understand why I keep missing everyone's calls.
It's like,
Hey, look.
yeah, I'm just figuring it
I love it. Intimate. Small room. We can have great intimate conversations.
out. When's the last time you cried over code?
That's a great question. Sarah? You feel like sharing?
Cry? Just do are we saying actually shed a tear or like, ugh?
Either one. What do you feel
Does it have
compelled
to be
to
like
share?
code? Yeah, but other aspects, I was like, just get
I wasn't really. You may need a different kind of meetup for that one.
I cry every day. Yeah,
Yeah.
just gotta let it out. You know?
Like, you may cry. You guys don't do that. All right. Well, let's do this. Thank you guys for coming. I think we should definitely like go around and introduce ourselves since it's a small group of us. I'll go first. My name is Claire. I'm the one who sends out all the emails that you guys get. A lot of you already know me. Let's see. I'll pass it this way.
I'm Halie. I work for CyberFortress, UI UX designer and developer. And Claire asked me to try and talk about what I do or something relevant to UX stuff. So,
Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria, and I work for the City of San Antonio ITSD, and this is the first time I show up here. I've been coming to a couple of them, so I'm very excited
Maria is definitely a
to
solid member of the group.
yeah to keep this going. Yeah.
For Microsoft Philanthropy's Teals, and I just to ask Claire if I can come in and just share some information about my organization with you guys. So that's what I'm here today.
Cool. Yeah, I'll be giving Abby the floor in just a second. You guys can hear more about that.
I'm Sarah. I'm a product manager at Jungle Disc. I work with Claire every single day. It's wonderful.
I'm so sorry.
You also have a computer science background.
Yeah. I used to be a developer, and I quit that. Developing sucks. Anyway. We can move on.
Well, I'm from Puerto Rico. I've come here recently. I'm working for the NISD I'm a programmer analyst, and I want to know more about the UX and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I'm actually studying at a bootcamp program. So
Oh, sweet.
nice.
Like here in town or?
no, it's online.
Nice.
Yeah, I want to know more about web development.
Cool. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Chris. I'm a senior interface designer at USAA. I work on the design language team there. I used to work with Claire.
Yes, I invited Chris because he's a badass designer. So more good, smart people to talk. Started in September, so we're still kind of feeling out the format and the timing and all that stuff. So thank you guys so much for being here. If anyone's tuning in online, hello, thank you. I guess I'll hand it over to Abby real quick before we kind of start on our
Want me to go there, or-
Yeah, please.
All of us have to, so.
Yes, you have to stand in the front and be the teacher.
So like I mentioned, my name is Abby Perez, and I am the San Antonio and Rio Grande Valley Regional Manager for Microsoft Philanthropies TEALS. And what TEALS is, we're just helping high schools helping high schools build and grow their computer science programs. And we do this by partnering classroom teachers with tech industry volunteers like yourself, developers. And what we do is they go into the classroom and they co-teach introductory AP computer science curriculum to the students. So basically, these are high schools that don't offer any computer science classes, but there is there are teachers that are wanting to bring it to their high school, but they don't know the content. So what we do is we bring in these volunteers to help them co-teach and learn that content throughout the school year, where eventually the teacher gradually moves on and is able to teach the computer science on their own. As mentioned, I oversee the Rio Grande Valley, so I do have about 10 schools that I need to find remote volunteers for, which is pretty cool because you can do it from here, from your home or from your work, and you basically remote in with the classroom and you do that interface with them as well. What else? So I know it was just a quick thing, but
So what is the actual volunteer position like entail? What kind of work do you do other than with the curriculum? You know, do you interact with the kids? Do you?
So yeah, it depends. So in San Antonio, I have 5 schools. So you would go. It would be a team of either 2 to 4 volunteers going into the school, depending on what curriculum the high school chose. So what I did want to say is that next week on April 3rd, I will be hosting a volunteer information session where I'll go more into specifics about the volunteer role. And that's April 3rd at Geekdom. So I do have an RSVP website or link that you guys can kind of go in if it sounds like something you're interested in, or maybe it's not the time, but you do happen to know of someone, maybe at where you currently work. It would be good for you to kind of share the word because we're growing. We're going into our 2nd year, and we've been a proven program for 10 years, and we are nationwide. We're in 28 states, including British Columbia now. So now we're officially international. So I do have some postcards. I'll hand them out, and I'll stick around in case you guys have any questions or whatever after the meetup. Okay. Thanks, Abby. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Now I'm the teacher. So, heads up, this time, usually we have snacks in the room. This time we have pizza, but it's at the end. We're sharing pizza with the other 2 meetups that are here, so yes, you have to stay to the end. Actually, you don't. You can go eat it right now if you want to. So, yes, we're going to maybe aim to end around 6:50-ish so that we can have some hang time with the other meetups, get to know other people. More networking is always good, I guess. So I think that's it for announcements. So let's shift.
I was going to say, the other meetups are another development meetup and AI meetup. So if you were interested in AI or obviously software development.
AI here?
Yeah.
I know. It's the React.
Oh,
essay.
wait, the AI is in the new?
I don't
Oh,
think
maybe
so.
it's in Geekdom. Never mind.
Scratch that. So if you're not
So-
down the street.
Oh yeah, so if you want to
Around the
go,
corner.
and so the other 2 are React Essay, which is React and React Native, and that one doesn't start until 7. So if you want to stick around for React, definitely should. And the other one is Code for SA, which is a kind of a Code for America type civic tech brigade. I think this is their first one, so cool to check that out and see what they've got on the docket for projects. I'm really interested in that. We talked a little bit at the beginning about being better at coordinating timing because I think all of those things are stuff that we have overlapping interests, so there's a little bit of a conflict. I know. But anyway, this time we're talking about UI UX. This is something that people have mentioned quite a bit as something that they were interested in learning more about. People that do show up, I promise, there have been more people. And I think it's super related to the role of developer, understanding how products get made. There's a whole cycle of design that happens often before a dev even sees it. So that's cool. I have kind of put together, but since there's so few of us, I'd probably rather have be more of a conversation. But I have pink slides, so I have to show them to you. So mine, I wanted to go first because mine's definitely a high-level introduction to the concept of UX. A background about me, I do UX, my title is UX lead at JumbleDisk. I've also done development work in the past, and this is a recent transition for me, so I've been doing a lot of new learning on the subject. So I'm going to do kind of an overview of UX, some high-level terminology and concepts, and then dig into something that I'm really excited about currently, which is user research. And there's some pretty, practical tips that I think people can go forth and start collecting data on their own that I thought were super valuable when I found them, so I wanted to share. A little bit about me, I guess. I want to build the thing is a quote from myself because I'm very famous. That was part of my motivation for starting to do CodeUp, which is when I became a developer. And that was 2015, which already feels like a really long time ago. There's a picture of Chris on there. So my journey was, I was in content marketing and I thought a ton about the people using our website, the people using our app, and I kept wanting to make their experience better, but I got so frustrated having to tell the developers what to do that I just wanted to build the thing myself. So I went into development at this boot camp and ended up working with the guys in that picture. Technically, we were a design firm, design shop, so I got to do a lot of design and development.
We have real clients and made money and everything.
Yeah, we did it. It was just that, but it was real. So yeah, we got to do design projects, but then build out the front end for whatever we were hired to do.
God, that was 2015.
That was 2015. I know. Look at that scarf I'm wearing. Don't have to look like Bob. I know. Look how short my hair was.
New hair Claire.
I know. That's the old hair Claire. So yeah, there's a lot of things about what I know that I have kind of had to teach myself over the years, just because it's something I'm super interested in. So these are books that I think were pretty much foundational to my ability to transition into this role. One of them, Don't Make Me Think, I think everyone who builds websites or apps that other human beings use should definitely read. It's written for an audience of non-technical, non-designers. It's like very common sense descriptions of ways to make something usable for other people. Digital products. The Design of Everyday Things is by Don Norman, is more of a kind of a conceptual book about user experience. I guess this Don Norman, the author, is the man who coined the term user experience. So it was like UX before UX was the thing.
Have you ever gone to a door and not known whether to push or pull?
Yeah. It's a lot. So you see the teapot on the front has the spout on the wrong side. It's very, very interesting, especially if you're interested in design as a, design as more than just websites, as a field.
Industrial.
Yeah, industrial design.
That kind of image.
It's an incredible book. I highly recommend it. And then information architecture, that's an O'Reilly book. It's not something I would recommend just sitting down and reading. It's definitely one of the books that I remember picking up when I was working on a specific project and realizing that information was something you could design that I had never occurred to me before. Because I studied communication in school, I was really interested in the ways that people coded and received messages, and I thought that I had to go into content writing in order to think about that. But thinking about designing information was something that really intrigued me. So information architecture is a user experience that sort of deals specifically with the words and the language used and the categories and the way that we design information, essentially the way we retrieve it and find it. So along my journey recently, I did a certification, which is not something that a lot of people do for user experience. It's not something that you need to do, but I found this super valuable because I hadn't ever had proper design education. It was something I had always taught myself. And when I started working at Jungle Disc, which was about a year and a half ago-ish, it was the first time I worked at a product company in that sense, not doing just client work where you kind of think through the project, put it together and hand it off. You know, when you work on a product, you're constantly iterating, you're digging a lot deeper into the details. So I wanted more education around how to do that, how to go about that work in a more structured, well-informed way. So that's where I am now. This is a picture of my desk last night while I was making this presentation. That book is something I'm reading right now, but I already know that it's one of the best things I've ever read, at least for my situation currently, which is that I'm a user experience team of one. You'll hear from another person who's that, and then Chris is in a completely different situation, so that'll be interesting to compare. At a young company, you know, trying to convince people to value design to the level of investing in it can sometimes be a challenge. So, you know, right now I'm a team of one. Before it was a team of 0. So I'm in the process of trying to build up a more user-centered culture at a company that's been very technology-centered. So thinking about usability, thinking about visual design in a way that we haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that in the past. So I highly recommend this book. It's got tons of really super practical tips about how to approach those conversations, how to incorporate design into a team or a company that doesn't have it at the time, and also just a bunch of like practical knowledge about methods and practices and deliverables you can use, like actual templates that you can use, which is super helpful. So yeah, that was an introduction to me. Now let's do an introduction. No, okay, that's good. That I feel like it's kind of learning about programming and code. You know, you don't.
People also know what it is.
Yeah.
I think there's the understanding of what they stand for, but there's also the understanding of what they mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you guys feel like you know what they mean?
No, maybe the difference because it's not the same, right?
Not exactly. Design responses. It depends, kind of, but so this is a definition for user experience, but they have an amazing repository of articles and information on a very wonky, nerdy version of UX if you're interested in it. But the user is all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, and its products. And then I added also the act of doing research and design activities to improve that experience. So when you say the term user experience, you're referring to the experience itself, but you're also referring to the role, the field, the practice of doing the work of user experience. So this is how I would relate the terms UX and UI. I would say that UI, which stands for user interface, is encompassed by UX. It's a major part of it. There is, you know, a ton of detail you can go into in terms of UI design. But UX is concerned with the interface, which is what they see on the screen, what they interact with. It's also concerned with the usability of that interface. So how easy is it to use? And then the last sort of high-level bucket of UX is the usefulness of that thing. So it doesn't matter if it's a beautiful interface that's super easy to click around, if it's something that nobody wants. So UX is also concerned with understanding what people need. If you're building a tool that nobody needs or wants, then the experience of it is not going to be good. So just another sort of comparison, I know that it can get a little fuzzy to understand the differences between a lot of these parts of a customer interacts with the company, then how does that apply to marketing and sales and those types of things. So this slide is just comparing customer experience versus user experience. And so customer experience is the big bucket, the whole experience, sales, marketing, branding, pricing, and support. And then inside that, the smaller bucket with a lot of overlap and, you know, related activities is UX. So that would be specific, more specific to the use of the product or service, like usability, interaction design, the visual design, the content strategy. So those are kind of terms that you would hear fairly often when you hear people talk about their roles, especially at larger companies. You know, there are people that specialize only in content strategy. There are people that specialize in visual design and interaction design. So there's a ton of granularity to it, but those are all sort of under. I was thinking about this the other day because I got sent an article that was like UX tips, and it was all about as well as being kind of the definition. So there are a lot of people who say things like UX when they mean marketing or they mean branding. So I think, you know, there's some utility in correcting those things, some not. Like trying to build up an understanding at the company is pretty important to me right now, just because I'm trying to like advocate specifically for investment in UX. But for the most part, it's more important to just create a good experience for our people. Yeah. So just a quick sort of mental metaphor that I like to use when I talk about what UX is. This is a picture of a kiosk at the airport to check in. And I like to reference airports a lot because everybody can kind of bring up a certain feeling of either a good experience or a bad experience trying to go through an airport, and
They're all bad.
more often than not, probably. And you know, it's sometimes very obvious the design choices that someone has made to either improve that experience or make it a lot harder. So the types of things that UX encompasses, this is a picture of what I would consider essentially an art installation at an airport, but a big wall of colorful glass, sun's reflecting through to make it enhancing the experience of being in a place without ever having to think specifically about functionality is also part of user experience, right? Like we can create things that influence people's feelings and attitudes when they're doing something that can transform their experience of doing it, that doesn't have anything to do with the, you know, the bag check or standing in line or anything like that. I also really like this picture that I found. This is a sign outside an airport that says kiss and goodbye, no kisses above 3 minutes. And I just think this is a great example of it doesn't matter what you want your users to do, they're gonna do what they wanna do. And sometimes you think that you can use design in order to just tell them what to do, like put up a sign that says no kisses longer than 3 minutes. But I have a feeling like this sign doesn't actually stop people from doing whatever they want.
5 minutes.
Is that the same limit as the parking?
You can sit in your car or you can kiss on the sidewalk, but you can't do both. Yeah, and this is just a great reminder of, you know, sometimes you watch someone use something and you're like, well, why are they doing that? They're using it wrong. And it's like, well, no, they're using it how they're going to use it. Your design has to accommodate that. So now we kind of understand what UX is. I guess, do you guys feel like you understand it? Do you have questions at this point? Anybody? Okay. The next slide is how do you do UX? And this is something the phrase "how do you do UX" is something that always sticks in my head because I feel like I hear people all the time and they're like, "Oh, we need to UX that," or like, "Let's do UX on that." Yeah.
Weird.
And it's part of the whole like building understanding around terminology and like, you know, UX isn't just a catch-all of like fix it, make it better.
Yeah.
It's a set of specific activities, but not everyone knows what those activities are. So this is one of my favorite graphics that I definitely stole from the same place that I stole a lot of these, a proper citation. This is a graphic design thinking 101. This is something that when I learned about it, totally transformed my approach to design. It's something that can feel very subjective and a little fuzzy about how to, you know, look at something and say, was it good? Is it bad? Is it what we want? How do we know? So there are a lot of very smart people out there who've done a lot of thinking about that, and there's some actual around this discipline of practicing UX, and a lot of people refer to that as design thinking. You might hear that, you know, in a lot of different circumstances. I definitely have heard it before. It refers to a specific set of the biggest thing I wanted to show with this graphic was that it's not a thing that you just do and then you're done. UX and design in general is something that you kind of are continuously doing. So this graphic is a circle that shows 3 large sections. The first on the side, understand, then explore, then materialize, and you're always kind of going around and doing those phases. So within understanding, you have the phase of empathizing, to conduct research and develop an understanding of your users. So when you do that, and then you have that understanding, you can define, so you combine all your research and observe where the problems are. So you don't have to look at the thing and say, okay, I'm going to identify where the problems are. You can conduct research, you can empathize with your users, so you're not assuming what they think or what they do. You can find out what they think and what they do. And then you can use that data to say, okay, here's where we got stuck, or here's where people got confused. And that gives you a ton of direction, you know? Instead of saying, like, let's redesign our website, we can say, well, let's start here, because this is where everyone gets stuck. And then the next phase is ideate and prototype. So that's sort of the visual design element, a lot of, you know, the solutions that you're developing for the problems that you define already by doing research. So you come up with your amazing, beautiful solutions that are super cool, and Haley's going to talk about prototyping, and I'm super excited. So once you have, sorry to put you on blast, but it's amazing. So you ideate, prototype, and test. So you're already kind of back in the stage of going back to real human users and trying to see, you know, were our ideas correct? Did our solutions work? And it seems super obvious that you would want to do that, but it so rarely happens like that. And even when you set out with the best intentions, even I myself say this with so much hypocrisy, because so many of the projects I do, I look then like, we should do testing on this, and it's like, well, we ran out of time. Dang it.
Testing is always the bottom of the budget.
Yeah, and it's budget, and it's, you know, people breathing down your neck about finishing things. And
So important.
it's
cheaper to test.
I feel like is learning how to argue for your own value, which is, you know, a completely different skill set, but it's definitely part of the job, and trying to convince people to spend more time on design. But the testing and the research part is what I want to talk about. So let's see. Oh yeah, so basically saying this gives you a framework for these moments. Right? This happened to me all the time when we were adult, when I was freelancing. I don't know how many times people would be like, well, I need you to build me a website. And that's where they would start. And then I would say, why do you need a website? And they would just look at me like, why wouldn't I need a website? Doesn't everyone have a website? Shouldn't I have a website? And so, you know, even as a developer, there are questions you can ask to try to fix some of those assumptions right off the bat. Like, if you approach any project from a user-centered perspective, you can kind of have the mindset of, well, why are we doing this? You know, who are we making this for? Who can I think about as the end user of this thing that they are imagining they need, and what does that person actually need? What are their goals? What are their real life circumstances that they're going to be using this thing in, so that we can say, maybe you don't need a website, maybe you need an email newsletter, maybe you need a mobile app, you know, maybe you need to stop thinking about a website because you're like a mom and pop shop and nobody looks online for your stuff. Like, there's lots of things that people assume that they need or want without actually, you know, checking in with the real people at the end of that.
On face value what they want, but understand what they actually are trying to do, and then provide a solution for what they need.
Yeah, totally.
Avoid all
So
the
often people are,
weird hang-ups.
yeah, people come to you and say, even in a product company, people are often like, well, we need to move that button over here because they're not clicking on it. And I'm like, well, why did you decide already that that's what we needed to do? Maybe we should think more about what the problem is first, and then we can come up with a solution. So just a couple of examples of, you know, ways to approach things with different questions. Like when I went to that training, I was really blown away by, most of the people there were from gigantic companies. There was a bunch of people from Red Hat there, and they had like 1,000 designers or something, like just a number where I was like, that is hard for me to even conceive of.
Yeah,
Like I can't even, so yeah. But I learned a lot more about intranets there than I had. Intranet is a fun term that just means like, it's an internet portal, but it's super insular to your organization. So it's not actually accessible over the internet, it's just accessible via a local network. So people use it, any companies that have sensitive data or just have concerns, like people build completely custom solutions for these all the time. So there's tons of UX concerns about this because it's the way people access their really important documentation or like find out what's going on at their company. They're not a paying customer, so not a lot of time is spent on optimizing that experience for them. But then the company realizes down the line, like, oh, people aren't getting this information and that's screwing things up. But that's one of the circumstances where you know a lot of the details about how this thing is going to be used. You know what machines that they're going to have. You know where they're going to be. You know what they're looking for. You already have a bunch of answers to those questions. Versus something like this, if someone says, I want to help my users with data privacy, there's a lot of questions you should probably ask before you start building a product for them. But sometimes people say this and then they go, so build me a mobile app. And you'd be surprised how many people you could hire that would say, okay, and they would charge you a bunch of money and they would build you a mobile app. So how do we figure out what the answers are? Research, yeah. So back to our graphic about design thinking. The parts where you do research are all of them, but primarily when you're empathizing with your users, defining your problems, and then testing your solutions. So there's tons of different ways that research comes into play. There's tons of different versions of research. So some of it is actually sitting down with users and testing products. Some of it is digging through statistical data to try to understand who your users are demographically. So this slide is just kind of a very high level reference of different types of research methods. One side is quantitative, the other side is qualitative. So the difference between those two terms really just means like words and numbers.
Yeah.
Like quantitative are things that you measure with numbers, qualitative are things that you describe with words. So I would say my examples here are you should decide what you're going to do by the question you're trying to answer. So that seems obvious also, but I hear tons of times people saying, we're going to do a survey, what should we ask? Or I'm going to start doing customer interviews, what should I ask them? And they don't start with a fundamental goal of knowledge. They start with the method instead of the question. So the quantitative question I have here is what % of people click the button? That's something we can measure with numbers, right? So there's different methods and tools I have listed there, like analytics, surveys, usability testing, card sorting, preference testing, A/B testing, which is, all things that you can look up if you're interested in quantitative methods, but for the most part, it's different ways to measure things, different ways to collect data that you can measure.
Quantitative is something that it's more difficult to do because you have to do it at scale. You need
Yes.
statistical significance,
So,
right?
yeah, quantitative data is not very useful to you unless you have statistical significance.
Yeah.
So you don't want to have survey 5 people and 3 of them click the button and say, well, 3 out of 5 people click this button.
75%.
Yeah. Like that's not how stats works. Yeah.
Qualitative is much easier to, it's much more accessible. Easier
Yeah, so that's
to
what I
talk to
kind of-
people, put things in front of people.
Yeah, you can learn a ton statistical significance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but the methods I have under qualitative here are just interviews, sitting down, actually talking to a human being who uses your product, which seems revolutionary, but it's huge. Usability testing, diary studies, which I think are fascinating, where people actually, diary studies is you have your participants keep track on their own of how they do things. So like you send them off on a task, that might span a few days, and they have to keep a journal and just check in. So you end up with a lot of data that's very open-ended. Like you don't have any guidance on like what questions you're asking. Like, so when you're looking for a TV, just kind of like every time they did anything around it, just record what they're doing.
It's just a template.
No, it was just kind of like, okay, I went to this website, look at the diary. Like they would kind of, like one woman went into like crazy amounts of detail about all the specific specifications of her TV that she cared about, and you know, the table that she made, like
I was
not even asked. Or some guy that was like, well, this one,
It
and
makes
you can
sense.
kind of they value and their personality. Like it's a cool thing. I think it's not the most achievable form of research. Like you'd have to have a pretty legit research team to set something up like that and recruit those participants, or you can hire, you know, there are agencies that do user research as well.
Research though is way easier than most people think. Like just putting things in front of people.
Yeah,
Listening
depending on
to
the
them.
scale,
All of
but
it, that's
like
research.
it's not hard to get information and get feedback. And that's like what I kind of wanted to give you guys as a takeaway as developers or as whoever you are on your team. If you're the one that cares about the person on the other end, like you can get customer feedback, you can get research data without having to have a team of researchers. So these are just some pictures of some usability tests, because I know I referenced that, but I'm not sure if everyone has, you know, an awareness of what a usability test refers to. So these are pictures of, one is a guy using an iPhone with a camera facing above his phone on the table, so there's a recording of everything he's tapping and scrolling and doing. I imagine in that scenario he's been given a set of tasks, but it doesn't look like there's anyone else in the room with him, so he's probably kind of being given a set of tasks, and they would call that an unmoderated test. So he's given the tasks and he's kind of doing it on his own. The next one is a woman sitting in front of a screen talking to a guy that's looking over her shoulder, and that looks more like a moderated test where you have someone in the room giving you the tasks, but they can also ask you follow-up questions. So that one is really helpful, because sometimes you design a test with tasks that you want your users to do, and then they get confused and they do it wrong, and then you know your test is kind of broken. Versus in person, you can kind of say like, oh, well, why did you do that? And you can follow up with them and get them to explain more. So in both of these scenarios, usually you would ask someone to just think out loud as they're clicking or as they're tapping. And these are the types of things that you can totally do if you have one person. So this is, says, you know, team, be your own researcher, which is kind of how I started doing it. So this is a graphic I stole from another Norman Group article, but this is something that they actually, like this is a foundational part of their sort of role in the field, is that they did this research about how many people do you need in order to do a good usability test, in order to identify like how many participants do you need. And they had determined that 5 people will get you 85% of your usability issues. So you don't have to have 50 people use your app. You can just use 5. If you only have enough, you know, budget to do 15 people, then you can do 3 different tests. You don't have to just do 1. So, and part of this article I really like is he said the most striking truth of this curve is that 0 users give 0 insights. So if you do no testing, you will learn nothing. If you do 1 person, it jumps you up to almost a third of this. Even if you can just sit down with another human being and say, hey, let's go through this. Can you do a couple of things and I can watch you and ask the questions. Like you will learn so much about the thing that you think you understand, how people will use it. So this is just a list of tools and I'm talking, oh my God. Sorry guys, that was a lot longer than I expected to be talking. But I was talking for so long.
No, I'm listening. Sorry.
Well, maybe we can go longer than 7. I mean, yeah. These are just some tools that I use for testing or research.
I gotta go on my phone. I'm joking.
You just broke my heart.
I got jokes.
Usability Hub, Try My UI, User Brain, Validate Lead. These are just things that I found over Google searches.
You don't have to do much.
Well, this is, this is stuff that I'm going to send out, so you don't need to write this down or remember it, but these are just tools. That's like, it took me 45 minutes to do this, and I got some data on like a design decision that I couldn't decide on.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and a lot of these have they call them panels of users, so you don't have to recruit anyone. You can just design your test and say, I want men and women aged 25 to 44 who are college educated, they make this much money, and like it just sends it to them. And their participants get paid to do your test, so you don't have to do anything. And like the only way I can actually get real research done, but I can get like people using my app and doing my tasks. Which,
Really?
Yeah.
Actual videos?
Videos.
Cool.
That's thinking out loud. I wanted to put one in there, but I was only doing the free trial and it expired. So but some of these are not even that expensive. So if you don't have a big budget, you can still use them. This is just, if you've never seen Google Analytics, it gives you some demographic information. This is a heat map of things so you can see where people actually click. This one I thought was interesting because you can see a lot of people clicked on that in the center, which was not a button. So learn something there. This is also just a description of how you might do some of that usability testing on your own. So just some tips, put your thing in front of someone who might use it, like as close as you can get to your representative users, and watch what they do. So make sure your tasks are open-ended, you're not leading them. Like, for instance, say, how would you find information on gardening instead of saying, use the search bar to find the article on annual plants. Like, if you tell them to do that, then that's what they will do, versus learning what they might do. And then asking open-ended questions, like, why did you do that? What do you think will happen if you click that? What do you think this company does? I think that that's a really useful question. Sometimes you can learn a lot about what assumptions you're making about how effective your marketing is. So
Claire, I think it's worth noting too that these don't have to be like live, interactive, prototype coded things.
some of these tools let you upload, where would you click if you were going to look for this information? Or like, there's tons of different tests you can do around static images before you build anything.
Early and often.
So this is just a picture of a sticker that I got, but I really like it. It says you, and then equal sign with a slash through it, the user. So you do not equal the user. And this is like, if you take anything away from this, remember that you are not the person on the other end. So whatever you assume will happen is not the way you should be. This is what our users want, and this is how I would do it. And they equate those two things. This is a common pitfall that people at all levels fall into, but just remember your target demographic. You have so much knowledge of how your product will be represented and who doesn't know any of that. So the first time you sit it down in front of someone who's never seen it before, that will click, So I highly recommend that anytime you have a product or a website or anything. That's the end of my talk.
It's good info.
Very generous for letting me talk for that long. I really want to hear you guys talks. So
All right. Do you want to go? I can go. You can go. It doesn't matter.
Take ours.
6:55 in case one is to leave, but
I'll try and make it quick.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I planned that well anyways.
So you can talk for 45 minutes. You can talk for 45 minutes.
I don't think I could. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Halie, and I do the UI UX designing and developing for CyberFortress, which is a small startup. Anything for the website and the demos we're trying to get out, stuff like that. So, as you can imagine, not design, I have to think about what the user's experience is going to be. I also build out the whole front end. Everything that I just designed, I also build. So being in that position, it's kind of hard to even want to stop and really plan. You kind of just want to start building. You feel like there's this time crunch and it's only you. But every time I don't plan, I realize it's a mistake. And I have to go back and spend a lot more time trying to make up for everything I didn't think out clearly initially. So some of my own background, before I graduated from CODA, only about 2 years ago now, my background was predominantly in visual arts. I went to Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design for a while, Denver, Colorado, and worked as a freelance artist that I learned about planning kind of learned more in that in my previous career, actually. And so out of Coda, I worked for a place called All Cat Claims Company, where I had the same role of UI UX, but also front end. Even though I was hired as a full stack for that, it's not fair. So anyway, that's kind of the general track that I've experienced myself, where I pull just everything together. So really the main reason that you're gonna want to plan is that it's about communication with clients. And you want to make sure that you're seeing eye to eye on pretty much everything you can before you really invest the time of designing it further or, actually starting to code it. And a lot of people are just very visual, wanted me to paint murals, just had an idea, they couldn't see it to the person who wanted it in the first place. And I kind of treat a lot of web development the same way. You could have a 3-hour-long conversation and still not actually be eye to eye, still don't really have the same idea in mind. And so when you're doing this, there's different stages of the design flow. You can start from wireframes, which is very basic. Mock-up is kind of in the middle, a little bit more visual from somewhere, but I recreated it so it looked like it was mine, but it's not. And I'm trying to remember where it came from, so that was Claire, most excited, which is awesome. Something about wireframing. If you Google search the importance of wireframing, you will find this image on a bunch of different blogs. So it kind of goes, I don't even really mention sketches because to me, sketches and wireframes are very similar. It's almost like a wireframe as if you were sketching, but not on pen, paper, pad, in front of a client. So the graphic about the time you should put in and fidelity, like the actual accuracy, how spot on it's actually going to be to the final product that you're looking to make. So you can put a ton of time into wireframes, right? Because they're not really the client. Accuracy, how spot on it's actually, because they're not really in mind, so you don't spend too much time there in the first place. But starting kind of from the bottom, wireframes are more about the architecture of information. So they're low fidelity, they're just a piece of information, not too much else outside of that. And it's good to use them for project documentation. And it's good to use them for just some quick insight, but more or less you may just, I kind of personally do both together. And so from here I can get more feedback from a client. As much of an idea of what it's going to actually be somewhere in there, exact. And you're just going to statically present the content and functions. This is going to be a visual design for you or for your team, and it's going to help. And as mentioned, it's great for getting general feedback on the aesthetics, the way it looks. Some people can't get over a certain color, or you'd be surprised what people get hung up on. So it's really good to iron that out. And you want to kind of imply the functionality. In one of the programs I'm going to talk about, you can kind of see like the flow of where buttons go. You can possibly show that. And so once you start doing the prototype, it's more about the functionality. And it's about basically providing the most accurate before you ever actually even start user testing. As Claire had mentioned, you could probably have things to some of these sites. And that's, you haven't even coded a single thing or hadn't even really think about it yet. It allows just to more efficiently kind of plan the back-end architecture. I know my previous, just some base notes from the client, not only myself and the back-end developer I was working with, but also the client realized that there's all kinds of things no one even considered. Like, what's this actually going to do? Once the user gets here, what's the rest of the step? It kind of just ends in some weird spot. So you can kind of learn just everything really from kind of simulating this experience. All kinds of stuff pops up. So some of the tools, one thing that I use Adobe XD, and it's a complete tool for wireframes to prototypes. And it is free as a starter plan, but like a lot of the Adobe products now, their kind of subscription deal that they have, if you subscribe to anything else, I'm pretty sure that you have the full plan, which goes you can have more than certain slides, the interactivity that you use in the little prototyping section of it or feature or whatever. You can have people click through. It's pretty cool. I like it a lot, and that's how also I made that video. And I showed Claire the other day. It's like ridiculously simple to do. Like
It is absolutely.
you could do it in. I mean, you just hit a record button, you do the stuff, and then it's on your desktop as a video. It's perfect. So, Sketch is something I've personally never used, but I wanted to include it.
I use Welch.
Yeah, so she uses it. And is it only wireframes or is it
No, it's full UI design.
so
it's like
for
a-
mockups as well?
Yeah.
Does it do prototyping stuff?
It does.
Okay, so totally ignore the first part. The lightweight tool for mostly wireframes, I was wrong.
It is a lot lighter weight than a lot of vector design. Like it's Sketch is built for
It's a bunch
UI.
of boxes and colors.
Yeah.
But it's made for web
Web
design.
design.
Yeah.
So it's a more accurate representation of what you do with code. It's what you can kind of accomplish with
Right.
Sketch.
Right. I could see that. Like I said, I haven't used it, but it is popular this year, but I'm going to like ask because that's my super
It's
quick
hilarious.
and totally.
I try to, like I said, you can only share it if someone else downloads the Sketch app. And like,
Right.
I was using it to design a mobile app and I prototyped the whole thing out in this.
Sketch and Vision combination, they're close to what XD can do.
Yeah.
For prototypes.
But you can still get there.
Yeah.
That's good.
Like,
XD.
Animation, I haven't seen any way to do with
Further than XD even scrolls to the side. XD can only do that. It's at least I could see where you might be able to. If you stupid hard, I wouldn't even try it. So, but so Sketch is you can get like 30-day trial to try it out, and then past that it's $99 a year.
Well, you can get after that, you have to rebuy
It's a
yourself.
super interesting.
Both of you know about it, so let's talk about it. But I've never used it, so I only know so much. I'm just making assumptions. And I put go to the website, you log in, you can kind of make ups and you kind of be doing a lot of extra work to make it much more of that. It's $13 a month for a single user. I think it's a little more for like a team of like 5. And one cool thing about it is that there's real-time project collaboration with it. So if you are on a team, 2 people can be working on the same document. You see where their mouse is. You see the changes happen on someone else's screen. If you both have if you're both on the page. So I've also never too. So who knows? But and then I included a link to where you can make a free account. And similar to XD, you get like one project unless you pay for it. You can at least try it out. And then at the bottom, I put this link to a blog post that had, I don't think mockups is that much included to try out 2019, whatever. So the whole one.
That I did for
And so this is something I made in XD, and it was very easy. We're trying to go. To make it seem more professional.
That's how I listen to music when I buy insurance.
Yeah, right. Of the same page, you could, because it allows it to really just clicking through this in real time.
When it,
Yeah, what you're
it's,
asking.
animated,
Yeah.
and it does generate that all the time.
Yeah, it's but this is what made me want to try XD and not do something like mockups. This video really quick of anything, any idea you have also just is that much more helpful.
Cool.
You did so much better than I did.
Huh?
You did so much better than I did.
I thought I was gonna have
15 after. I'm happy to. I'm sorry, Claire.
I was
Should
kidding
do
about.
Long, long talk.
It's just more. We're talking about design system. We should say that before asking. That'd be so much.
Bye-bye.
You missed so much.
You too.
It'll be on the live stream, so you can watch it later.
Okay, good, good. Yeah.
No,
Preserved.
definitely not.
No pressure.
I did look and I think there were two
To
people.
your
People on there?
2 people, which adds quite a bit to our numbers.
Are you ready to get famous?
Doubles the.
Let's see. Oh, it's down to 1.
Okay. An introduction to design system. I'm sorry, my deck is very simple. This is actually a downloaded template.
Oh my.
That I put together last night. It was free.
I finished mine, yeah, obviously.
Mine was fully custom.
Yeah, well, so is mine. I even ripped off that crap.
All I wanted was, anyway, all right, we're gonna talk about design system, an introduction to design system, super high level stuff. There's all kinds of information out there on this kind of stuff. I by no means am an author of this information. I'm only a proponent of
Oh my gosh, do you work for a giant company?
and
now?
an ambassador of. My name's Chris. I'm a senior interaction designer. Currently, what does that say? I'm a visual interface designer based here in San Antonio. Currently working on the design language team at USAA. And I've been designing and building stuff for 15 years. What is a design system? Anybody? Raise your hands. I'd love to hear a definition from anybody. Just a shot. Anybody?
Chris,
Nobody?
you
Design system? Yes. Okay, we'll keep going.
It's a series of.
Series of tubes.
Oh.
Oh, no, it's a hamster.
Oh, hello.
They're actually here. My husband.
Aw.
Oh, that's good timing. I'll grab a beer. All right. So a design system is a collection of reusable components and documented with clear standards that can be assembled together and used to build consistent experiences. That's a very packed sentence, right? There's a lot of stuff going on there. It's like a pattern library, brand guidelines. You guys heard of this kind of
Chris,
thing?
it sounds like the pattern library.
That's what I'm
Wait,
answering a
is
question
that the
for
same
you.
thing?
Nope.
Oh.
So design systems are simply a collection of assets and components. The system defines how components work together and documents best use cases and enables teams to build consistent experiences.
So it's rules.
So much of design system is about how to do the thing. You have brand guidelines, you have visuals, you have a library of things you can pull from, but without that, well, let's go here. Lego is a good example. So here we have a pile of Legos, right? Can you see this? So pile of Legos, right? So you can build an infinite amount of things with these Lego pieces. It is a system. I actually really love this by this person's stuff.
Yeah. I like that better than I'm sure the action.
So you have all the pieces, you know, you have an idea of what you want to build. You want to build a spaceship. For documentation. So documentation should help designers and developers and teams understand how to consistently build larger patterns. So consistently is the key operative term here.
Look at those
Instructions on how to build a spaceship.
Like hyper control or
visual instructions.
instructions.
I don't even think that's actual Lego instructions. That's like a ripoff.
It looks a lot like it.
That's the Lego. All right, so here we have a set of Lego pieces, right? We got a bunch of 5 different things, right? So you give this designers So here we have, let's pull some of those components that we have from the material design system. So we have a text, a timestamp, just a container, a couple buttons. Put those. I do I've done most of my interaction animation with Keynote.
Secret, I just
We have the text label, we have the timestamp. Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to. We'll do that again anyway.
No, we just wanted to see it.
All right. So a lot of this stuff is from a guy named Brad Frost. This methodology of atomic design. Here's a quote from Brad. As the craft of design continues to evolve, we're recognizing the need to develop thoughtful design systems rather than creating simple collections of web pages. We're all made up, and everything's made up. Molecules, organisms, plus templates and pages. We're not going to get into that stuff. That's pretty obvious. So atoms are the basic building blocks of matter applied to a web interface. We have an input and we have a button. All three of these, you put those things together, we start to create a molecule. So we have 3 different atoms, probably maybe even 4 with an ion, that can create molecules. So molecules are groups of atoms bonded together and are the smallest fundamental unit of a compound. Compound components. These molecules take. So then you bring that molecule into larger pieces and into organisms. So here we have like a navigation bar, right? So we have that entire mock-up of a search bar, an entire kind of lockup of a search bar, and we move to a navigation that creates this larger kind of organism. All right, here's some of the stuff I would kind of want to break down. A good design system should consider components. So components, the actual kind of pieces that you're designing with and building. Spacing, accessibility. So accessibility is a huge piece of work that I do. So making things accessible to all users. Color, type, tone, hierarchy are encouraged and enabled to.
are on your team contributing to that design system.
That designers and developers can pull these down and reuse these things. Designers and designers, and they want to, they want to build a 2 or you're a team of 300. Like, you can benefit from the design system. It is ours to iterate and build content. On our team, we work with a team of presentation infrastructure who we build or we design the things we build. Right? And that's kind of what the design language is. Design language and React, right? Put out in the world. There's no way to build a thing. Because there's no developers have insight that designers don't have, and there should be, back and forth. Design. There's what else? There's IBM's. What do they have? I forget what it's called. Any large organization, any huge company out there has a design system.
Does yours have a name?
A lot of them. Make it kind of a thing that we can share with people.
Yeah.
Not something that you can download and use, but something we can work for. Like, go be a champion for the design. They're valuable and important. Come on. My entire team right now.
It's so cool, guys.
Maybe you guys.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Get up.